6 months later, Oak Ridge Estates had transformed. American flags flew freely, basketball hoops dotted driveways, and the community bulletin board advertised block parties instead of violation notices. At the community garden, built where Gerald's surveillance equipment had once been stored, residents gathered to plant spring vegetables. Among them was Gerald, now serving his community service hours by teaching gardening skills he'd learned during his military service before his failed law enforcement attempts. "Sheriff," Gerald acknowledged as Michael dropped by to plant tomatoes with Emma. "How's the program going?" Michael asked. "The therapist says I'm making progress with the control issues," Gerald replied. "And the Master Gardener certification gives me something constructive to focus on." Emma ran up, holding a seedling. "Mr. Gerald, is this one ready to plant?" As Gerald knelt to help her, Michael observed the neighborhood around them. Kids playing freely, neighbors chatting across property lines, and not a single violation notice in sight. Sometimes, he reflected, the most dangerous people aren't those who break the rules, but those so obsessed with enforcing them that they forget the very purpose of community. And sometimes, those same people just needed to find the right place to belong. Michael Dawson hauled the last heavy box labeled MA's TOP8IES from his pickup truck, his sheriff's department t-shirt soaked with sweat in the August heat. His radio squawked from inside the cab. He was technically off duty, but the department was short-staffed since 2 deputies had quit after the contentious election that had made him the youngest county sheriff in state history. "Daddy, where does this go?" 10-year-old Emma stood in the driveway holding her soccer MVP trophy, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Your room, sweetheart. The one with the bay window," Michael replied, noticing a silver Lexus crawling past their new home for the 4th time that afternoon. Something about the car's deliberate pace triggered his law enforcement instincts. Kelly appeared at the door, hair tied up in a bandana. The previous owners left a stack of violation notices from the HOA. Apparently, they were cited for decorative stone placement inconsistency, whatever that means. Michael laughed. "Small-town politics. Can't be worse than what I deal with at the county level." As if summoned by their conversation, the silver Lexus screeched into their driveway, blocking Michael's truck. 3 men emerged in matching navy polo shirts with gold badges embroidered with Oak Ridge Estate security. The leader, a wiry man with slick back hair and aviator sunglasses, approached with a tactical-style flashlight on his belt, despite the bright afternoon sun. At 10-tone res IDNT, he announced at a volume better suited for a riot than a suburban driveway. "I'm Gerald Thompson, Chief of Oak Ridge Estate Security. You've committed multiple violations including unauthorized moving hours, unpermitted commercial vehicle presence, improper waste receptacle visibility, and," he paused dramatically while pointing at Emma's soccer ball on the lawn, "recreational equipment deployment without prior written authorization." Emma whispered, "Daddy, is he a real police officer?" Before Michael could respond, Gerald produced an official-looking citation book. "Your information, please. I'll need to see identification and proof of property ownership immediately." Michael, still holding his daughter's trophy box, caught Kelly's eye as she mouthed the words, "Be nice." He'd promised her no workplace drama in their new beginning. "Listen, Mr. Thompson, we just closed on the house yesterday. If there are procedures, PLINC is not OPTAONL." Gerald interrupted, his 2 associates flanking him in a practice formation. "Failure to provide identification constitutes resistance under HOA Bylaw 347B. Michael noticed the men wore utility belts with handcuffs, pepper spray canisters, and what appeared to be fake radios. This wasn't just overzealous HOA enforcement. These guys were playing cop. By the end of his first week in Oak Ridge Estates, Michael had received 17 violation notices. His mailbox was 2 inches above regulation height. The American flag on his porch was displayed with non-regulation mounting brackets. The basketball hoop, a housewarming gift for Emma, was visually disruptive to neighborhood aesthetic coherence. At the neighborhood barbecue, Michael discovered he wasn't alone. Susan Chen, a cardiac surgeon 2 doors down, had been cited for medical waste disposal after putting a bandage wrapper in her front yard trash can. Jim and Carlos Rodriguez Williams had received a notice that their garden gnome displayed ethnic characteristics inconsistent with neighborhood decor standards. "Gerald's gotten worse since they gave him those uniforms," whispered Evelyn Porter, an 82-year-old widow who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built. "Last month, his security team tried to impound my grandson's bicycle because the reflectors were non-approved safety accessories." Michael had been avoiding confrontation, but when he discovered the security committee had installed cameras aimed at his property, allegedly for HOA violation documentation purposes, he decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting. The community center was packed. Gerald and his team sat at a raised table, their security uniforms now supplemented with shoulder epaulets and what appeared to be imitation police badges. Michael took a seat in the back, still wearing his department windbreaker after a long day. When the security report began, Gerald projected photos of various homes with circles highlighting alleged violations. Michael recognized his own front yard, with arrows pointing to unauthorized vegetation growth that was, in fact, the rosebush Kelly had planted in memory of her mother. Furthermore, Gerald continued, kicking to a slide labeled "Criminal Elements." "We have reason to believe new residents are engaging in suspicious activities, potentially including impersonation of law enforcement officials." The photo showed Michael's personal county-issued SUV parked in his driveway. "This vehicle has been observed making irregular movements and contains equipment consistent with surveillance operations. We recommend immediate action under our security protocols." Michael stood up. "That's my vehicle, Mr. Thompson. I'm the county sheriff." Gerald's eyes narrowed behind his aviators. "Anyone can claim law enforcement status. Do you have documentation to support this assertion to the board?" Before Michael could respond, the HOA president, a nervous man named Walter, quickly adjourned the meeting, citing time constraints. As the room emptied, Gerald approached Michael. "We know what you're really doing in this neighborhood, and we'll be watching. Oak Ridge Estates is our jurisdiction." At 5:42 a.m., Michael's phone rang. It was dispatch. "Sheriff, there's been an incident at Riverford Dam. State Police requesting county assistance for emergency evacuation coordination." Michael was dressed and heading to his SUV within minutes. The storms last night had been intense. If the dam was compromised, thousands of residents in the lowlands would be at risk. As he opened his garage door, he was blinded by spotlights. 3 vehicles blocked his driveway, light bars flashing in patterns remarkably similar to police emergency lights. 6 figures in what now appeared to be full tactical gear stood in formation. "Hail T. Security Enforcement in PROGRES." Gerald approached in a vest marked COMLNDO with a bullhorn. "Michael Dawson, you are detained under Emergency HOA Security Protocol 9. You have been observed exiting your residence during prohibited hours while in possession of a fraudulent emergency vehicle." Michael's training kicked in. He assessed the situation. 6 men, no visible firearms, but several carried expandable batons. His service weapon was locked in his vehicle. The nearest deputy was at least 15 minutes away. "Gerald, I'm responding to an actual emergency. The Riverford Dam may be failing. I need to coordinate evacuation." "A likely story," Gerald interrupted, his voice trembling with excitement. "We've been monitoring your communications. Your constant excuses about being law enforcement end today." 2 committee members approached with zip ties as handcuff replacements. Michael raised his voice. "GRLTHOMPSON. Stand down, immediately. I'm Sheriff Michael Dawson of Clark County. You are interfering with an emergency response and impersonating law enforcement officers, both felony offenses." Gerald's face flushed. "Citizens have the right to detain criminals. Section 8, Paragraph 3 of our bylaws authorizes." The roar of engines cut him off as 3 marked Sheriff's Department vehicles skidded into the street, responding to Michael's text to dispatch about the obstruction. Deputies emerged with actual service weapons drawn. "Sheriff, are you okay?" Deputy Rodriguez called out. The blood drained from Gerald's face. His security team began dropping their batons. "Aye," Gerald stammered, looking at the actual law enforcement surrounding them. "We were just conducting a neighborhood security check." The local newspaper headline read, "HOA Security Committee arrested for impersonating officers, interfering with emergency response." Below it was a photo of Gerald and his team being processed at the county jail, still wearing their tactical vests. The story was dramatic enough to make regional news. What began as an investigation into Gerald's HOA security operations quickly expanded when authorities discovered he had been using homeowner dues to purchase law enforcement equipment, surveillance devices, and even a retired police interceptor kept in a storage unit off-site. More disturbingly, the team had compiled files on every resident, complete with photographs, daily routines, and threat assessments. Michael's file was marked highest threat, possible UNDRCOVER agent. 2 weeks later, an emergency HOA meeting was called in the high school gymnasium to accommodate the entire neighborhood. The previous board had resigned in disgrace when financial audits revealed they had approved over $180,000 in security expenditures without proper oversight. "I never thought it would go this far," former HOA President Walter admitted to the crowded room. "Gerald said his security measures would increase our property values." He seemed so confident, and honestly, a little intimidating. Michael, now recognized by everyone as the actual sheriff, had been asked to speak about community safety. He approached the podium still in uniform after coming directly from work. "Real security isn't about imposing control through fear," he began. "It's about building relationships, establishing trust, and creating systems where neighbors look out for each other." He introduced a community policing liaison program that would provide legitimate safety resources without infringing on residents' rights. When he finished speaking, Susan Chen proposed dissolving the HOA's security committee permanently and replacing it with a community engagement group focused on neighborhood improvements and social events. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting ended, an unexpected visitor entered the back of the gymnasium. Gerald Thompson, recently released on bail pending trial, stood awkwardly in civilian clothes. The room fell silent as he made his way to the microphone. "I owe everyone an apology," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "especially Sheriff Dawson and his family. His voice cracked. "I lost my job as a security guard 3 years ago. This neighborhood position made me feel important again. I took it too far, way too far." He revealed that before his HOA position, he'd been rejected from police academy twice, creating a bitterness that festered into obsession. After the meeting, Michael found Gerald in the parking lot. "You know you're facing serious charges," Michael said. Gerald nodded. "I deserve them. The DA might consider alternative sentencing," Michael said carefully. "Community service, mandatory counseling. But you need to make restitution and commit to a different path."